This week, in the Leadership and Communication segment, being concerned is not enough. What boards should know and do about cybersecurity. Time to look at the role of the CISO differently. How to spot and develop high potential talent in your organization, and more. In our second segment, we air 2 RSA conference interviews from Fortified Data and Looking Glass Cyber. Business Security Weekly starts now.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we explore the business of security to improve the security of business. Your trusted source for actionable insights on leadership, communication, and innovation. Get ready for Business Security Weekly.
Right now, everybody is talking about cryptocurrency, and the criminals are hiding in the conversation. Cyber criminals use social engineering, loaded with urgency and fear, to successfully prey on your company, your employees, and your customers. Spear phishing is just one of 13 types of email threats. Barracuda has identified these 13 types and shows you how to protect your company, your customers, and your reputation. Find out about the 13 email threat types and Barracuda email protection. Get your free ebook at securityweekly.com/Barracuda. That's securityweekly.com/Barracuda.
It's time to rethink how we approach cybersecurity, because the reality is modern cyber attackers are already past your initial defenses. ExtraHop helps your security team find and eradicate advanced threats before real damage is done. Protect your enterprise and customers with better defense. Learn more about how ExtraHop stops advanced threats at securityweekly.com/ExtraHop. That's extra HOP. Monitoring and maintaining compliance is a never-ending struggle with a high price of failure. FIREMON helps customers meet complex and varying compliance requirements. FIREMON has fully customizable reporting, analytics, assessments, and dashboards to meet the compliance needs of any organization. With FIREMON, compliance reports take a tenth of the time, and real-time continuous compliance eliminates the anxiety and headaches of audit preparation. Improve security outcomes by improving security operations with FIREMON. Visit securityweekly.com/FIREMON to learn more.
Welcome to Business Security Weekly. This is episode number 265, recorded June 13th, 2022. I am your host, Matt Alderman, home safely from the industry's second largest super spreader event. Joining me remotely are my co-hosts. First, Mr. Jason Albuquerque, who did not attend the super spreader.
I'm glad you're back safe and sound, man. I heard there are little issues going on, but it's all good. Everybody's good. Some people may have the sniffles. But good event all in all, I hear.
Or a little cough here and there, maybe.
A little cough, some sniffles, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Also joining me, who was at RSA with me, is Mr. Bill Brenner. Hey, Bill.
Hello there. I mean, the week after RSA, don't we all have sore throats and sniffles anyway?
Yes, especially when you're at cigar bars until 1 o'clock in the morning, talking for 4 days on end, and then your wife comes in for the weekend and yells at you for not being not sick, or at least not horsey in the throat. And just
COVID
for the record,
COVID is the new con crud.
Yeah, and I said this was the second largest event in cybersecurity. The first was actually in February of 2020. Same event 2 years earlier. Don't miss any of your favorite Security Weekly content. Visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to any of our podcast feed and have all new episodes downloaded right to your phone. You can also join our mailing list, Discord server, and follow us on social media and our streaming platforms. Also, join us on June 29th for a webcast with Tyler Robinson and Bo Bullock to learn how to pivot into the world of crypto security. Visit securityweekly.com/webcast to register with your name and email address only. Don't forget to check out our library of on-demand webcasts and technical trainings by visiting securityweekly.com/on-demand. So, Jason, thank you for saving me today. We had some issues with what we thought was going to be an interview segment today. So we're going to do our articles, which I actually pulled together a couple weeks ago before I left for RSA conference. Thought we were going to do an interview. And then, anyways, so articles, then we're going to do the RSA conference interviews we did last week, and we'll go from there. All right, so
Adapt
let's
and
start.
overcome, my friend. Adapt and overcome.
Hey,
That's it.
we're professionals. We do this every week, Jason.
That's right. That's right. We know what we're doing.
Exactly right. So this first article I pulled is being concerned is not enough. What boards should know and do about cybersecurity. Jason, we talk about this topic a lot. It was pretty interesting last week being at RSA conference, talking to a lot of individuals. I've been out vetting some different technologies. I've been looking at some different areas on the advisory side, and it gets interesting, right? There's this real lack of connectivity between the CISOs and the boards, and it works in both directions. I think there's struggles for the CISOs connecting with the boards, and there's just a lack of board interest in some organizations around cybersecurity that is impacting the CISOs as well. Any thoughts on this initial article?
I think not for lack of trying, CISOs want to get in front of the board. Any CISO who's in an organization who has a seat at the executive table is scratching to get at the board level and have that relationship. I think to your point, it's the engagement on the board side that we need a little help with. And I think anything we can do to influence, anything we can do to be out there in the business environment, influencing these boards and these business leaders to get them on a track to want to engage with the CISO is important, right? So, for example, I'm about to partner with a local business media group here in my state because I've noticed this gap between board level in cybersecurity executive and even C-level executives in the cybersecurity executive. I'm committing to start writing business-centric cybersecurity articles for Providence Business News, on a monthly basis to try to help, garner that relationship, build that relationship. So I think it's up to us to start trying to influence as much as we can, so that way we can help build that connection. So if you're in the industry, start trying to connect with members of boards, start trying to influence other C-level executives that you may have connections with who aren't cybersecurity experts, and really just start promoting and evangelizing for the need. I've said it a few times on this show. It's a telltale sign when you have the Secretary of, the Department of Homeland Security a year ago now on Nightline, I think it was like ABC Nightline, one of those news shows, saying, listen, this is an imperative. This isn't a should, this is a shall. Every business in this country needs to be speaking the language of cybersecurity, and you need to make that a top priority in your organization.
And Jason, the government showed up last week. FBI, CISA, NSA, all had booths at RSA conference last week. We've been waiting for the engagement. You said, now they're out talking about it. They're actually showing up at these events now. They're actually being activists in the community because it has become such an important issue for the critical infrastructure areas, as we know, and with the work that CISA's been doing. We see an increase in ransomware, which the FBI's been all over the place. You have all the increased attack surface and attack areas with Ukraine, so the NSA's involved. But they're showing up. They're actually finally there at these events, engaging with booths on the floor. I was talking to Dave DeWalt briefly I think it was on Wednesday. He came over for an editorial interview with Jill, and he said the first thing that sticks out to me is the government showed up.
Government presence, yeah. And that's something that I think folks who are on boards need to know. They need to know that one of the largest conferences out there that cybersecurity experts go to, the government entities are showing up now, right? They need to know that. It's that important. It's that important to our businesses, to our economy, to our country, that they're showing up at these conferences. Read the tea leaves, board of directors. That must tell you something, right? So we need to be out there evangelizing that and educating. I think we have to educate these C-level executives and these board members, so that way they're, we're pushing them to engage.
Yeah, we've got an upcoming interview. The one we were going to do last week, right before RSA conference, we had some timing issues and we ended up not doing it. But we've got them rescheduled, I think, for that next week's show, to talk about the SEC, what he believes will happen with the SEC and mandating some of the security expertise on the board. Very similar to Sarbanes-Oxley back in the day on material financial weakness. Material security weaknesses are going to be something that's going to come into the board going forward. I was talking to, I think it was Malcolm Harkins on Thursday. He said, we've done this before. We did it in Sarbanes-Oxley. Make the CEO, make the CFO, make the CISO sign off on the security controls and make sure there's no material deficiencies in your security controls, just like we did with Sarbanes-Oxley with the CEO and the CFO for financial controls, right? I think that's where we're going to head. And if you're a board right now and you're not thinking about what's coming, you better get ready, because I think it's coming.
Yeah, and I think they're going to, honestly, I think the majority of board members are going to get sideswiped by it. It's almost like they have an inkling, but I think when it happens, they're going to go, holy crap, it happened, right? Again, this article, being concerned is not enough. Well, I would preface it with it's step one. You actually need to get them to engage. So they have to have a level of concern, want to engage, and then we can start getting them on a maturity path. But we got to start having the conversations first.
Yes.
So question for the both of you. We talk a lot about the need to educate the board. And we've certainly written a lot about how boards are taking more of an interest and how CISOs are increasingly getting a seat at the table. But do we think CISOs, by and large, are doing the right things to help boards understand?
I think it's from my perspective, I think it's all over the place. It's not a definitive answer that I can give you, because it all depends on the maturity of the CISO. If the CISO is business centric, that CISO is going to be able to influence the board, because he's going to be able to speak, or she's going to be able to speak the language of the board and make influence and be able to make change. If they're coming at it from a purely technical perspective and a bits and bytes perspective, they'll probably have a meeting or two with the board, and then everything will be done through the CIO or through the CEO at that point, right? It's right. I really think it's all over the place. There's no really standard right now, right? Now, I've seen CISOs deliver board reports in all different fashions. The most successful ones I see are business oriented and risk oriented.
Yeah, and it's funny, Jason. You and I were talking a couple weeks ago about some stuff, and just the transparency and the willingness of most CISOs to really understand what's going on in their environment also varies greatly. Right, there's just certain things some CISOs just don't want to know. And it's like, really? You sure you don't want to know? Because it might help you. But there seems to still be this, I'm just going to put my head in the sand over here. I'll be okay.
Yeah, right. And embrace it. Embrace the accountability. And use it as an opportunity to learn how businesses operate, right? I mean, it's your ability to mature as a business executive, not just a cybersecurity executive.
Yeah. This next article is interesting, Jason. Time to look at the role of the CISO differently. And he lays out this timeline over the past couple decades of the CEO role. He starts in 2002, 2009. The CISO is a risk manager. I don't think so. I think the role of the CISO was a compliance manager. So stick with me for a second. Then 2010 to 2019, the CISO as a firefighter, absolutely in the trenches, dealing with the alerts, the alarms, all the analyst fatigue, all the stuff that went on with the advanced SOC, fully get it. 2022, the CISO is a transformational leader. But to be a transformational leader, you also have to be a risk leader. And so I didn't like the risk manager in the early days, because it was really about compliance. It wasn't about
100%. You and I are on the exact same page. That's the first thing I picked out of this article, was the fact that 2002 to 2009 timeframe is mislabeled, right? You're absolutely right. It was about complying to regulation. It was about compliance and managing that. It was checking the box, right? And then absolutely, that decade of 2010 to 2019 was, reactive firefighting, 10 years of that. And now the CISO is a business risk management and transformation leader. No doubt about it, right? That's the role of the CISO from now into the future, is to be that transformational leader who helps manage business risk at the highest levels.
Yeah, I just think, I agree with you. He calls it the compliance decade, but he called them risk managers.
Yeah,
they weren't risk managers.
And that's why I said mislabeled, because the definition below, pretty spot on. It's the label above that I think shouldn't have been put on it.
Yeah, and that's where I tied in the next article, which is some of the three strategies for leaders, right? Because as you think about the CISO moving into this transformational leadership role, this business risk role, they are going to be working with a lot of the leadership across the team. Mm-hmm. They've now got to, elevate their game with the CEO, with the board, as we were talking about in the first article, right? And so as you think about things the CISO has to be cognizant of, it's some of these leadership traits that they're going to have to really think about. And I love this first one, be aware of your ego.
Always. I absolutely love that as well.
Yeah,
take your ego and throw it in the closet and get rid of it, because your job now is to learn the business, right? Engage with the business leaders, engage with the other executives, and be a consultant to the organization to help them manage risk, right? You're a service provider. You're providing a service to the business. So serve, right? Don't let your ego get in the way. And it's not just with relationships with colleagues, right, or peers. It's with your team as well. You know, you don't want to have an ego with your team. You want to give them an environment where they can thrive. So check your ego at the door all day long.
Absolutely. Because number 2, choose courage over comfort. Mm-hmm. Now think about this. I kind of hinted at this a little earlier. It's really easy to sit back and go, we're doing everything okay. We don't have any, major vulnerabilities. We don't have any major areas.
That makes me laugh, because I'll sit back and I'll challenge that and I'll say, how well do you understand all the processes that are in your finance team? How well do you understand all of the processes that are in your HR team? Guaranteed you don't understand them soup to nuts. Guaranteed you don't know every level of vulnerability or risk that's in those departments. You have to understand how the department operates in order for that to happen, right? So maybe from a technology perspective, but that's not all that matters.
Right. And really wanting to know if things are working or not working. It's okay if you have blind spots, if you have gaps, if certain things aren't working. No one's perfect. But why take the easy road, which potentially puts your organization at risk, when you can have a little more courage and go, no, I want to know if there's other areas out there that we don't have visibility into, or if there's compromises in my network. Why wouldn't I want to learn from that? Right? 100%. And as a leader, you should take that as a challenge to make yourself better.
Put the intellectual curiosity in fifth gear and let it rip, right? Understand how the business operates. That's where you're going to identify risk. You have to know how all of the business units operate. You have to dive deep into it. But that's what, that's getting out of your comfort zone. That's becoming a business leader, right? That's what it takes. You have to understand how the business operates. You have to be able to connect and build that level of trust with your HR leader, your finance leader, your services leader, right? All across the organization. And to build that trust is you need to be able to speak their language. You need to be able to identify with what they're dealing with and what they're working with.
Right. Yeah.
And write in their language. That's another area where I think security professionals tend to fall down, which is making the effort to reach out across teams. So you mentioned HR as an example, legal as another example. But if you look at the emails, there's still that language disconnect.
Yeah.
And you lose the person that you're trying to communicate. I still hear about that happening a lot when I talk to particularly people right below the CISO level, people at the influencer level, let's say.
Yeah. I mean, there's only one way to understand if there's a vulnerability or risk in, your 401k contribution program, You need to understand how that works, what the tools, who the players are, who the stakeholders are, who the third parties are, so you can identify risk in that process. Well, to do that, you need to have a connection into the HR team, into the finance team, to know how all of those financial transactions are happening.
Yeah. The last one is really important, which is that transparency piece, right? The one that I'm a huge believer in, because I think without transparency, you don't build trust. And as a leader, if you don't build trust, you're toast. You're done. 100%. You're just done.
You know, it takes a really, really long time and a lot of effort to build trust, but you can lose it in an instance, right? So that's why once you have it, take care of it, right? You know, focus on it. Make sure you're always focused on, because again, transparency, that's a trust builder. Make sure you're always focused on keeping that trust level. In order to do that, you have to be constantly giving folks the information they need in a timely fashion, being transparent. You said it earlier, nobody's perfect. We all screw up. Being able to open up and have that level of vulnerability just builds trust. To say, listen, I think we screwed up here. We're going to fix it.
Yep. In the case of cybersecurity, the best defense is education. Interesting article. I'm going to touch on some points on this, but I think there's a typo at the end. It says, overall, don't overlook the most important step. Promote awareness and create a strong anti-cyber culture in your office.
Yeah,
I don't think you want an anti-cyber culture. So I think there's a small typo in there.
Yep.
Look, we've talked about
this. Depends on which part of cyber we're talking about.
Oh, right.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would hope they would put like cyber threat or cyber criminal or something like that.
Right.
If they were talking about the bad guys.
Right. Exactly right. But when you read it, you're like, wait, don't you want to promote like a cyber culture, like a cybersecurity culture? Like you're missing a word, so I'm not quite sure if it was a typo or not a typo because it's not clear. Anyways, just that's the last sentence in here, which I agree with, by the way. But the challenge has always been around the education side. And awareness training is, I think, still mediocre at best. And this is nothing against all the great technologies and all the great vendors that are out there. This is nothing about that. I think it's just hard for humans to really understand the consequences of what they're doing and apply it to themselves at work and at home, etc. Right? We've seen this struggle. Yeah, you can craft better training. Yes, you can craft better content for that training. Like, yeah, you can do some of that, but we still know that 5 to 6% of our employee base is the riskiest and likely to do something. And it may not be malicious, but they're more likely to create an incident than any other. So I think, although education is valid, the problem is if you train 100%, in my opinion, the 94 to 95% that get it are just tired of all the mandatory training. And the 5 to 6 who need more focus aren't getting it. So how do you balance the all versus the most risky? And I think that's something we have to continue to evolve in the industry.
Yeah, and I mean, it's that 80-20 rule that you talk about, right? I mean, I always put it in the 80-20 rule where 80% are going to get it, 20% you're going to have to focus on a little bit harder. And it's about how do we get the lead measures to identify that 20% or 10% or 5%, whatever the case may be in your organization. How do you identify them and then provide that remedial training so that way you're not overwhelming the rest of the staff, like you said, that get it, right, that are doing the right thing. How do you identify that risk? And how do you mitigate that risk? Is it remedial training? Is it bumping down privilege because they're just a known offender and they're going to screw something up at some point? Having conversations with their management about, limiting privilege and things of that nature. It's something that you have to chase to minimize the risk. But it's the lead measures that you have to be able to identify before it's too late.
Yeah, absolutely. How to spot and develop high potential talent in your organization. Another fabulous HBR article. We talk about elements of this. We talk about aptitude and attitude around skill set, right? This uses cognitive quotient, drive quotient, and emotional quotient. to identify high performers in different areas and then how to nurture those talents in your workforce. They give some really great case studies at the end of this about how they use these different quotients to actually influence how they identify talent and then move them into different roles and how they move them there.
Yeah. And I love that you aligned it to the attitude and aptitude conversation that we have, because that's, as I'm reading this article, I'm like, yep, attitude, aptitude, that's how we hire, right? And it's, you take the cognitive quotient, which is how they really leverage their intellect. You take the emotional quotient, how they're acting around with others, they're interfacing with other people, how they're building relationships, and then that whole drive piece of it. What motivates them, what makes them want to be better, what puts them in a spot that gives them energy and wants to excel. That's the attitude and aptitude, right there. And if you can hire for that, you can train the technical pieces, right? You can bring the technical trainings and certifications and things of that nature to the table. I think we'll get a lot more diversity in our workforce. We'll get a lot more folks infused into the workforce if we take this model first and then figure out the technical training. Yes, it's a bit more of investment in the end, but I look at it as a long-term investment.
Yeah, and that's where the next article, developing a reskilling program, actually, as you identify those resources and those folks in the organization, and you need to reskill them to fit into cybersecurity, this starts to lay out some of the different phases you have to go through in that reskilling program. So again, this is actually a case study from a company on how they built out their real reskilling program to move people from one part of the business into the security side of the business. That's a really interesting formula, kind of a starting point for organizations that are large, maybe have multiple business units. I think this was a telco, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
I believe
so. Yeah, I believe so.
Was it telco? I thought it was a telco.
No, actually, it looked like World Bank project. Something like that, yeah.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I couldn't remember which one this one was, where they have staff, but they're not skilled in cybersecurity. So they built out this reskilling program over 4 different phases to convert those resources. And it's a great model for organizations that have a lot of employees, that when you identify those potential candidates, how do you then give them the skill sets they need to actually succeed in the role?
Yeah, and I love the 4 phases that they outline. One of the big ones for me is skills forecasting. Try to predict, future state a little bit, so that way you can be pipelining staff, for that demand management. So look at it like a demand management pipeline. What am I going to need next year? What am I going to need potentially a year and a half from now? Work with your other business executives and say, hey, what are we ramping up for new offers, new products, new services? What are we putting out there in the future? What's in the pipeline? So that way I can skill accordingly to help support that.
Yeah. It's funny because they talk about long-term 5-year planning. And I was sitting down with a CEO. I said, does anybody do 5-year planning anymore? He goes, we actually have to. When you think about it from an investment perspective, he said, look, everything in the next kind of 2 to 3 years is pretty well known. But he said most organizations are going to go through some sort of funding or some sort of acquisition at a certain point in their time frame, right? And they're always in these 2 to 3 year chunks. But he said you have to build the 5-year model, because you got to show what the next 2 years look like when you're in the middle of that cycle, whether it's fundraising or an acquisition, right? He says, so I still have to build 5-year strategies, even though we're really executing against the 2 to 3. The last 2 are there just in case we need it, but it usually gets revised, because I remember when I built the 5-year strategy at Tenable back in, it's like late 15. Yeah, I think it was December of 15. That was a long time to think about what the company was going to look like, and it's changed dramatically since, obviously. But I
don't think many organizations do a 5-year projection at this point. But it makes sense. I mean, in that again, it depends on your vertical and what you're doing, and in that instance that you mentioned, it makes total sense.
Yeah. Hey, Bill, you want to do a 5-year plan for content?
How do you know I don't already have one in my drawer?
Yeah. All right.
No, it's. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
It's just It's funny. I wonder if some of when we talk about companies where they're not doing 5-year planning, how much of that is, look at all the upheaval we've seen in the past 2 years. The why bother when you can't account for these 100-year events that just seem to be popping up with increased regularity. That's kind of the cynical point of view, but I do have to wonder how much of that is going on.
Yes, that is true. This last article is really easy. I threw it in here because SC Media opened up the nominations for women in IT security. This is an event that Jill does every year, and it's a great way to nominate and identify women in our industry. So nominations are open until June 24th. So anybody who wants to nominate, I think there's 5 different categories. It says 5, but then the article only listed 4. So, Bill, I'm missing one. But there's cybersecurity veterans, power players, advocates, and women to watch are at least 4 of the 5 categories, according to the article. So if there is someone out there you want to nominate, please do that before June 24th. I think this is a great recognition program for the women in our industry, and it's a way for us to continue to diversify our industry.
And for a lot of us who just came back from RSA, we were reminded from seeing them face to face after 2 years just how many women qualify to be in the running. So now's a good time to fill that out.
Absolutely. Gentlemen, always a pleasure. Thank you for joining me. We're going to take a quick break and then air our RSA conference interviews with Fortified Data and Looking Glass Cyber. We'll see you next week on Business Security Weekly.